the so-called uniquely low status of Australian women is set to undergo a fair bit of revision across the next decade or so. That revision is coming about as more Australian historians do comparative work in other countries that had a new settlement, had a frontier experience, and now have a highly urbanised, multicultural, modern society. The more comparison one does with the United States, with Canada, with New Zealand, with South Africa, and other such countries, the clearer it becomes that frontier cultures produce conditions that are adverse for women. I think it might be the case that in the past, so horrified have historians been by what they've found in the frontier for Australian women that they've assumed no such condition applied elsewhere. I think the research base is too thin to call it this one yet, but I have to confess to a certain scepticism about claims that Australian women had a uniquely low status, and I think at minimum we have to be very clear about what our performance criteria are for what constitutes status.
We don't just like it, we love it. We don't just like it, we love it.
The rise of gender studies in universities and even in schools finds plenty of work to do in the deconstruction of that most potent field for myth-making, advertising.
The world knows just who we are. We've done so much and we've come so far.
I think there's an interesting theory about that Australia is now becoming somewhat subservient in the international field and that we're in danger of losing our own identity in that broader kind of cultural sphere that we find ourselves in. And it's possible to make comparisons between that and the situation of women in Australia historically, who are regarded as having been invisible, as having been marginal, and whose role in creating Australia is unrecognised. But I think there are some dangers in that, and I think the danger is this, that whereas you'll find in official histories and official documentary accounts, there is no attempt to address women by and large until some of the recent feminist work. In fact, you find a lot of those histories are extremely dull and boring and don't tell you much either about how Australia developed as a form. But if you look at other cultural forms, novels, films, plays, books, music, poetry and so on, you find that there's a very strong sense of the role of women, what they did, the richness of their lives, how they complemented and supplemented the work of other people, and how they were essential in terms of establishing identity, in terms of developing different regions, in terms of making a mark on the economy, on Australia. So I suspect there's a bit of a danger of separating men and women's roles out as being totally separate and alien and having not much to do with each other, in the same way that we're trying to set Australia as being separate, different and isolated from the international context. That I think we probably have to see both in a much closer kind of attention and look at the way they interrelated and in a way they supported each other in a much more interactive kind of a process.
Amen. What a tower and end to be joined together for all time.
Sending rule to the world. Helping to build a nation to the greatness our fathers dreamed of. It's a big job, Wayne.
Yes. I'll be needing some young chaps to help me.
Well, I suppose you could advertise for them, couldn't you?
If you would like information about studying through open learning, phone 00 55 11 770.